Welcome to Feedback Studio. This is one of a series of videos exploring the different ways in which Feedback Studio enables us to use rubrics. If you've never used rubrics before or are unsure about how they work, then it might be an idea to look at the video introducing rubrics before you continue with this one. There are 4 different ways in which you can use rubrics in Feedback Studio. There are standard rubrics, ideal if you want the rubric to calculate basic grades for you. There are custom rubrics, for when you want to have a little more control over how the rubric calculates grades. Qualitative rubrics, for when you don't want the rubric to calculate a grade at all and just be used for providing structured feedback. And grading forms, the quickest and easiest way to create a simple rubric and apply it, either without grades or with a simple manual grading. Each of these different types of rubric have their own videos to accompany them, but in this video we're going to be focusing on custom rubrics and looking at how you can create a rubric that gives you maximum scope for controlling how the rubric calculates grades in an assignment. To begin with, we need to get into the Rubric Manager. There are 2 ways of doing this. The first way is through the Moodle plugin. To get here, simply click on the assignment, and here in the Moodle page for the assignment you'll see this distinctive little Lego type icon which represents the Rubric Manager. If you click on this, then you'll see the broad Rubric Manager, and significantly you'll see as well that the styling of the Rubric Manager is still in keeping with the classic Turnitin from before the arrival of Feedback Studio. Some of you may prefer this because at least it's familiar. However, as you can see from this, it's not the easiest because the window is too small to view the whole rubric. Instead then, we're going to access the Rubric Manager through the assignment itself. And to do this, I'm first going to click on an uploaded assignment. When the assignment is open, I'll go over to the toolbar on the right where all the options sit, and here the blue toolbar represents all our feedback options. And there once again is our little Lego icon representing rubrics. Clicking on this will open up the rubric panel, which shows nothing at the moment, but that's not important right now. What we're interested in is the little cogwheel in the top right corner. This settings icon will take us to the Rubric Manager. As you can see, this time though the Rubric Manager looks rather different. It's taken on the theme, the look and feel of Feedback Studio rather than the older style of Turnitin. Perhaps more importantly though, it's bigger, enabling us to fit the whole rubric onto the screen, which is certainly better for demonstration purposes. Aside from a few minor differences though, it's pretty much the same as the other Rubric Manager. We can still see the criteria listed down the left-hand side, and the scales are still listed across the top. We can still edit the title of the Rubric Manager rubric at the top, and the menu button is still there in the top left corner. The import-export functions have been moved from the top right into the menu, and their names have been changed to upload and download. The top right instead has a drop-down menu, enabling you to select which kind of rubric you want to use, which replaces the rather more obscure series of grey icons that used to be at the bottom of the window. The Attach and Detach button has moved as well. Before you would have found it in the top right, but now it's in the bottom left. And the icon has been replaced with a clear title and a slider to toggle between Attach and Detach. Okay. So now we've familiarized ourselves with the Rubric Manager, we can go ahead and create a custom rubric. To do this, we need to go to the menu in the top left. And from here we can see at the top the option to create a new rubric. Clicking on this will open a blank rubric. By default, the rubric is set to standard, but we can easily change this by going to the drop-down menu in the top right, where we can change what kind of rubric we want. And from this list, let's select Custom. Those of you who've already looked at one or more of the other kinds of available rubrics might already notice the key difference with this custom rubric. For example, in the standard rubric, you would see a series of percentage numbers running down alongside the criteria, and these percentages represented the relative weightings for each criteria. At the same time, you would expect to see a series of numbers alongside each scale, and this would relate to the specific grade that would be given for anything graded in that particular column. In this custom rubric, neither of those sets of numbers are here, but instead what we can see is a series of numbers in each individual box within the rubric itself. This gives us complete freedom and flexibility to assign whatever grade we think appropriate to each and every box. Let's see how it works. I'm going to create a simple rubric from this blank template, and I'm here borrowing a rubric from a unit on problem solving. To begin with, I'm going to give the rubric a name. And having done that, I will create 4 basic scales: beyond expectations, meets expectations, approaching expectations, and incomplete. Of course, you can choose however you want to organize your own scales. This is just an example. Now I'm going to set some criteria. Identifying problems and factors relevant to problems, using these to formulate clear problem statements. Using recognized problem-solving techniques to analyze problems in terms of root causes. Developing possible solutions that address the root causes of a problem and that can evidence validity and reasoned rationale. Identifying strategies for monitoring and evaluating solutions. Great. All that's left is for me to fill the boxes with a description of what is expected from the assignment. So, for example, an assignment that meets expectations in terms of identifying problems may contain an analysis of a specific problem scenario and the identification of a central focus for developing possible solutions for the problem, and key problem statements determined from the same scenario. In contrast, an assignment that demonstrates little or no evidence that the problem scenario has been analysed in terms of relevant information or key problems, and little or no evidence that key problem statements have been determined from the scenario, might fit better in the incomplete category. Of course, some assignments might produce more than the manifest requirements of the task, perhaps demonstrating everything expected, and in addition, key problem statements that concisely and convincingly condense the problem scenario into a focused line of inquiry, in which case we might suggest that this fits better with the exceeds expectations category. You get the gist. So let's wave a digital magic wand and fill in the rest of the boxes. There. Now we simply need to determine what scores we are going to give for each of the boxes. There are no restrictions on what we give. If we wanted to, we could give 2 for one box and 92 for another. Although in the majority of cases, I imagine there's likely to be a little more consistency and equivalence involved. What it does mean, though, is that we can determine for ourselves the value of each achievement and reward it accordingly. In this example, I'm going to give each square a score out of 20, but there will be variations between them. There. Now my rubric is set up. I can save it and attach it to the assignment. If I close the Rubric Manager, we can now see what the rubric looks like in action. Each of our 4 criterion are listed in the Rubrics panel now, and each has a slider that we can use to give the appropriate score to the assignment. As we move the slider along on each criterion, we can see the score appearing on the right, and significantly we can now see a cumulative score appearing above it. This cumulative score adds up all the scores, alongside the total maximum amount of points available. If we click on the blue button Apply to Grade, then this score will be calculated as a percentage and appear in the grade at the top of the assignment. Now, one thing that can be a little irritating here is that each score does not appear along the slider. Intermediate spots are left with just this little line. And if your scores do vary from one criteria to another, you might find yourself forgetting which one is which. The way round this is to use the expanded version of the rubric when marking, by clicking on this little Expand button at the top of the rubric panel. This will open the rubric in this nice, big, easily visible grid, from which you can simply click on the squares you think match the assignment. Every square you click is automatically saved and can be easily changed. From this window, you can either apply directly to the grade here, or close the window and apply to the grade at a later point. And there we go. Custom rubrics. In many ways, a much simpler option than the standard rubrics, which do require some rather precise mathematics to get right.